Welcome, everybody, to the Grim, Dark, Filthy Casuals podcast. We're here for episode 1, where we're sort of discussing some of the new reveals for 9th edition. Brian Tabata, your host, until they fire me or they find somebody better. But I got two other GDFC members here, and I have Dustin and Brian. And Brian Moy as well.
Boy, howdy.
So, we wanted to start off and just do a little introduction for everybody. So, I wanted to kind of ask everyone, what is your favorite army, and what is some of the aspects of the game that you find the most enjoyable? Let's start off with you, Dustin.
Well, naturally it's orcs, because orcs are the best. The big, green, mean fighting machine, 12 to 15,000 points of them. I better love them, otherwise my wife is going to really kill me for spending that much money on orcs. But
Come on. Our wives don't know how much we've actually spent on all our armies, or none of us would be here.
50% off.
I show her the eBay prices, and I tell her it's an investment. It's an investment, baby. One day I'll buy my son a car when I sell off these models.
Yeah.
Someday in my 80s. But the reason why they're my favorite army is the same as my favorite aspect is I just love the mob. I love having that big, overpowering horde just flowing over your army, spilling everywhere. I know Brian's going to disagree with me a lot on this in terms of his favorite aspect. For me, it's the nameless soldier. It's rando guy inside a herd of people just coming at you. Love it.
A man of the masses.
A man of the masses.
What about Brian Amoy?
Oh, my favorite army. So I've been a Craft World Eldar player since 2nd, and really went into Ynnari in 7th edition. And I've loved Ynnari all throughout 8th, mostly because they had that broken mechanic. And even when they made the switch, I've still really liked them. However, I have dabbled a little bit more into Drukhari and Harlequins, as well as fleshed out some of my Grey Knights. So I'm going to pick two. My favorite army, I'm going to go with Ynnari, with a close second being Grey Knights right now. Favorite aspect of the game, other than stomping Brian, I would say my favorite aspect of the game is probably the social aspect of it. I really enjoy the community. I enjoy meeting new people and really learning about how other players approach the game, why they like it, what makes them tick, and just, everything about their life in general and how they got into 40k. So that's probably my favorite aspect.
Yeah, very ninja-like, careful yet precise.
Yeah, I can understand why you like stomping me so much, because it doesn't happen that often. So you gotta relish it whenever you get the chance. So
this is true.
But for me, I love the heroes that arise in game. Particularly that lone sergeant. For me as a faithful player, it's that pack leader that just does something completely heroic. And I know the instant I saw that lone wolf stratagem on the 8th edition Spatial Codex, I was instantly sold. I was like, when can I buy a Tooth and Claw? And, thousands of points later, the story has written itself. We've all sort of playing a little while. We've been through some edition changes, and it's no secret 9th edition is right around the corner. We've seen several previews throughout the week. They had the big launch event on Saturday, and then they've done previews throughout the entire week where they've shown us things about the new command structure or command phase and the turn structure. They talked about Crusade, how detachments are changing and how you write your lists, as well as how command points are generated. They've also talked about the changes to missions, game size, and they've also shown us a few of the new models. So today we were hoping to kind of look at what do all these sort of changes tell us about the direction of the game, and what we sort of think is in store for us in 9th edition. So, did you guys have any sort of initial reactions for turn structure, command phase, or was there anything that really stuck out to you from this week? We'll let Brian kick it off this one if you have any particular thoughts.
Yeah, you know what? I'm curious about the command phase. I don't know that we've learned enough about it yet, but one of my favorite aspects of the ITC you deploy, I deploy, you deploy, I deploy format is there's a mini mind game in there, right? So you've got these mini games within a bigger game, and I'm curious if there's any of that within the command phase in of itself. So I always found that to be a pretty interesting aspect of 40k, are these little mini games that you can play to try to outthink your opponent or try to bait them into doing something so you can do something else.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of play in there. They mentioned different missions might see different effects and things occur in the command phase. I also really like how there's a trend now where the scoring objectives now occurs at the start of your command phase, forcing you to hold an objective for an entire turn.
Oh, 100%.
It's a great change, and some of us have experience with that mechanic coming from Adepticon, us being Chicago players, and I think it's going to be a great fit for a lot of people who are very competitive with the game, but at the same time very casual with the game. It rewards a different style of play that I think a lot of players are going to really enjoy.
Yeah, and it does a good job of encouraging the ability to kill other units without just strictly creating an objective to kill other units every turn.
Yeah, it's kind of that balancing act between, some people have the complaint on ITC games where it's very much about the kill, wipe out the other team, and then move on, versus kind of book missions, Eternal War, where you sit on the objectives and just have a big fat horde that can't get moved and win the game that way. This is a nice middle ground between the two, I think, that can be very satisfying.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it also, in ITC, a lot of us would probably say that going second is hugely beneficial for the ability to knock opponent off of a point and hold that objective. But being forced to hold it throughout an entire battle round essentially, or until your next turn, adds a whole other dynamic, which I think levels the playing field a little bit. So I'm excited for that aspect as well.
Yeah, first versus second. That's been a big complaint all throughout 8th edition. I've heard so many times that if you don't get first, you're going to lose the game. And then with ITC players, if you don't go second, you're going to lose the game. Now it's not nearly as cut and dry. And I think it's also important that we saw with the turn structure too, is it confirmed that one of the rumors that have been really thrown around there of implementing a sort of random AOS style turn mechanic, that's been shot down. It's not going to happen. I know a lot of people were worried about that. They were clutching their pearls on that little rumor, but it's dead. It's gone now. We can move past it.
I, for one, am glad they stuck with the turn structure.
Same.
I haven't played since second edition. It wouldn't feel like 40k to me if they didn't keep with that tried and true. Some people might love it, some people might hate it, but it feels very 40k.
I love AOS, and in AOS, the random turn mechanic is it's not as punishing as I presume it would be in 40k, but it's still a very, very divisive mechanic. I myself am not completely, sold on it myself. And I'm glad we didn't see it in 40k. That's for sure.
Yeah. But you're right. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was gonna say, for me, it's real telling of the direction that they're taking. Where they're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. They're not trying to really shake up the whole scene for 8th edition. They're really just trying to tighten stuff up, streamline it, and adding this command phase. Even now there's a place for it that needs to happen. Right? There's designated times things should happen, and they're really trying to streamline it and really work out a lot of the nuance that was occurring in the rules before, rather than just saying, guess what, you have to roll for turn priority now.
Oh, absolutely.
My biggest takeaway from all these different reveals actually comes to the turn structure, in that I think my impression is that it's really showing that they're listening to the players in a really great way that we might not have seen in the past. One thing I love about the Blood Bowl community, for example, is there's a league that GW is consulting with all the time when they make new rules. New rules aren't coming out unless it's being first consulted with that player base. And when you see stuff like ITC style rules coming in, Adepticon style rules come in, people listening that AOS turn structure might not be beneficial, these all have a stamp of they were listening to the player base, they were listening to play testers, and they're coming out with a 9th edition that is bigger, that actually is bigger and better. That's not just marketing hype, because those ears are open now.
Yeah, and I think.
Wait a minute, listening?
It works.
Well, I'll do you even one better. It's not just listening, but it's even learning. You're seeing them incorporate things from other, game systems they develop. They're taking bits and pieces that they think work well. You can just look at even the way that they're sort of working on Crusade, and it seems like they're pulling a lot of elements from Kill Team, maybe some elements from Path to Glory from Age of Sigmar.
Some of the best parts of Warcry also, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one really great thing about Crusade they mentioned is you don't have to play other people in your campaign. You can just take your army, show up to the store, and play whoever's there. That's straight from Warcry, and it's a really free experience. And they're taking these great bits and not afraid to bring them into the game. But at the same time, if maybe they don't work, like rolling for a turn priority, right? They're not afraid to leave them at home.
Yeah, great point, Brian. And I'm really glad that these are no major overhauls of the game and the mechanics. 8th edition has been by far the best edition of 40k that I can ever remember playing. And what I do love that they're doing is, again, taking that feedback from the community making some adjustments, whether it's from the mission structure, from some of the different phases of the game, and just tightening them up a little bit or streamlining them and making a better gaming experience. And I think that's just going to lead to having 9th be even better than 8th edition. So I'm super excited for it.
Now, that being said, though, I think we're going to have a different experience because it is a lot of seemingly little changes that are having a big effect. And, the internet has already been abuzz with the change to detachments and command points. I don't know if either of you had any strong thoughts or strong impressions of what they had shown so far.
You must unlearn what you have learned.
Yeah. There's kind of a cacophony of haves and have-nots, right? If you're a Custodian player, you are super pumped because all of a sudden you are flush with command points and you don't have to really hamstring yourself or bring the good old loyal 32 with you. But if you're a Horde player, if you're a GSC player, if you're an Orc player who's accustomed to having, a couple battalions, maybe a brigade, just command points everywhere, there's a lot of negativity coming from that. But I think if a Horde player sits down, does the math, sees what they're going to be spending those command points on, I think they're going to find they're going to be about the same place as they were before. So no real negative change for them there. Really, we're seeing some of the boats that were kind of lower down in elevation rise up a little bit with the tide, which is a good thing. I could see how it'd be so frustrating for a Custodians player to see all the fun I'm having, blowing 10 command points in a turn and say, well, I want to do that too. And now they can, which is great.
Oh yeah, and on the flip side, for some of these armies that were really forced into just swarming the board with models like your orcs, maybe it opens up some new different types of builds, right? Where you can think about adding some more elite choices or going with a different route that you may not have considered in the past because you don't need to bring 3 battalions or a brigade for CP. So, I would encourage everybody to just think about the new toys that you're getting, the new ways to play the game, and not be too constrained by thinking of the old ways of playing an 8th.
Yeah, no. Even for me, sat down and I was like, oh, maybe I can try and think about some lists and brainstorm some lists. And ultimately, I concluded, well, there's still so many unknowns, but there was a liberating feeling when you're like, even though as a Space Wolf player, I have good troops. Space Wolf intercessors do great work. But when you realize, like, oh man, my 4 Reavers now, there's I'm not giving up as much bringing in
without bringing Reavers in.
But it does open up other options, and I'd be very curious to hear from Dustin on another army orcs, right, which gets a lot of value out of its basic troop, out of its boys. Does the prospect of opening up maybe potentially other slots, does it sort of give you any ideas, or is there anything you've been kind of leading towards?
Well, it's huge. I can't be more excited. Before my list, I needed a lot of CP to do what I needed to do. And sure, it featured a lot of boys, but it featured a lot of Gretchen too. We're talking, 60, 70, 80, 90 Gretchen. And that's a ton of points. Gretchen are cheap, but when you got 90 of them, it really stacks up. I don't have to do that anymore. If I want to run the crazy mega super shock attack gun without bringing a garbage bag full of grots, I can do that. And that's fantastic because it means then, instead of paying all those points for those grots, I could have more toys on my list. I can bring in one of the super cool Gorkanauts or a big blob of Killicans with a custom job now and let that go play instead of having a bunch of Gretchen just sitting in my back line screening for the full game.
Oh, and I'm super excited about that. You're exactly right. One of these days when ninth launches and you are deploying against your opponent and you're seeing a completely different army composition than what you used to see, that's going to bring big smiles to my face.
Now, as a Grey Knight player, do you have any fears about fighting 30 paladins on the or have to be forced to field 30 paladins and bring them to the table?
Well, I think it just opens up, like you said, new builds because you think about it, right? Like Grey Knights need a lot of CP, so you're bringing 2 battalions. That's 6 strike squads at a minimum. Now maybe you just bring the 1 battalion, and instead of strike squads, you might fill in with interceptors. I might be able to bring, God forbid, a land raider, or even some Grandmaster and Nemesis Dread Knights again with their ability to shoot out of combat. So I'm super excited about how that opens up the game. So
with anything
it's going to be so different.
The detachment changes are rewarding you for doing that too. Instead of having detachment after detachment after detachment, it's rewarding you for filling out every slot in that detachment and having a force that's way more varied. Which is fantastic.
That's a great point.
I think one thing that's kind of flown under a lot of people's radars is I think the new actions are going to have a very subtle effect to that. Because, yes, you could bring those 30 paladins, but if these little cheap guardsman squads of 10 men go around raising flags and raising banners, and like you can do it on your backfield objectives, if you're doing this, they're scoring you some serious victory points.
That's a great point.
If you fill yourself with all elites, you might be able to stretch, depending on, we got to see what all these sort of secondaries are. But what they had previewed is, you have 4 rounds of scoring the primary if it's a 5-turn game, mounting to 60 points. But they also mentioned you're picking 4 secondaries, and they have to be different, or from the different categories, which, that's half your points right there. They're going to be made out of these secondaries, which, if you got these cheap little squads, they're going to have to sacrifice shooting and fighting to do so. So
yeah, that's where I tell some people to kind of rein in the exuberance on the prospect of being able to take nothing but fast attacks and just riding bikes as if it's a motocross rally all over the board. Troops, they're still going to have a role in this game. They're still going to be extremely important. With the new secondaries, they might even be more important than they were before. So don't let this think that you need to put your intercessors on a shelf, your brood brothers on a shelf. They are still going to have a place in this game. And yes, even my poor Grots will have a place in this game.
Oh, absolutely, Dustin. Like, just thinking about
Grot
it,
Shield's a thing,
there's
right?
army. I'll be sad when I don't see 90 Grots lined up against me. But you bring up a good point, right? In that troops are still going to be valuable, if not more valuable than they are today. In the fact that if the opponent's lining up and they're bringing all elites or fast attack, I might still be able to dynamically insert a strike squad and just take an objective with objective secured. Hopefully that's still a thing. So who knows how that's going to go, and I'm super excited about the prospect of list building and how that's going to take shape over the course of 9th edition once it launches, because it's going to be a whole new game. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, especially with the changes to reserves, there is a lot of value in screening, and just having more pieces on the board that you can just put forward and make trades with for victory points, has a lot of value in its own. The classic saying, right? Quantity is a quality all on its own.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that even more, I think, when we get to the game size. Changes.
Yeah. So Dustin, why don't you kick us off there? So what do they talk about for game size here?
Sure. So GW has put out some, I guess we can call them rules. They're no longer just recommendations for what the minimum size is for a game, and they've broken it down based upon the point amount that you're playing with for a game. The big news to come out of it, though, is that if you're playing the standard 2,000 point game, the table size has changed. A lot of people have very, very mixed opinions about that. I'm looking at my 6 foot by 4 foot table across the room right now and kind of shedding a small tear that table no longer perfectly suits a game of 2,000 point 40k. But the times have changed and we need to adapt to it. A lot of people have been wondering, what is this going to do for shooting armies? What is this going to do for melee armies? This, out of all of the changes that I've seen throughout the course of the week, this for me is by far the biggest. The change in table size can't be understated enough. I think we've already seen some changes that they've announced in advance that kind of way it softens the blow a little bit for some people. Take, for example, let's say that you are a dedicated Imperial Guard player. You love your brand new tank aces that just came in your Psychic Awakening book, and then you hear that the table is all of a sudden 1 foot shorter. That means that a Screaming Horde of Orcs is 12 inches closer to you than it was before. But they kind of jumped on that at the head of the game by saying, well, now there's going to be some new ways that a tank can shoot even if they're in melee. You're kind of beating that at the pass. But this is going to be huge. We talked a little about screening, and now the board's going to be easier to screen. There's that much less space to screen. There's that much less space to have your deep strikes pop into those different pockets that would have been easier to find. It's going to mean different changes for table terrain, how you array your guns. For me, physically, how many models can I actually put on the board in my deployment space?
Thank God points are going up.
I know, right? Because LVO last year, I'm like, where the hell am I going to put all these mech guns? Like I can't physically put all of my units on the board. You're going to go in deep strike. You can't fit. I'm sorry, the terrain just does not allow it. But yeah, it's huge, and I think people should start thinking now, just spatially, where their army is going to fit in a board size. We know the dimensions already. It's something that you can practice at home and think about as you're kind of doing these preliminary new list ideas and going through this ideation.
I think one of the subtle things, because I agree with you in a lot of ways, but I would focus the game change, I think, more to mid and late game. Because when the first mission that they previewed, the 4 pillars, the starting distances between deployment zones is effectively the same. Admittedly, right, if you were backlining your army, you lost some ground there. But realistically, if you're backlining your army, unless you were Eldar fast enough, like, you're probably in a bad spot in the game anyway. I think this is going to have a much bigger impact mid and late turns, because how you can maneuver and how you can kind of get around the board gets more restricted, or you sort of get locked into your zone as an opponent kind of starts out maneuvering you on a smaller board.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the mid and the late game are going to arrive that much faster.
Yeah.
And for players who aren't accustomed to ITC play and ITC terrain style rules, I think they're really going to see the biggest swing here in terms of maneuvering around terrain. They're going to be accustomed to a very, very different style of play. So hopefully they'll be able to move along with the learning curve there.
That's a good point. And this is fun because I just played a game against a good friend of ours who we have these really fun casual games. And I would say a lot of casual gamers, which I admittedly am more often than not, like to try to decide the game within the first 1 to 3 turns, right? So they're just throwing everything forward and then trying to kill as much as possible, take as many objectives as possible, and decide the game. By nature, I'm pretty conservative, and Brian, you know this about me. I try to play for 6 turns, so my first turn or two is very conservative often. What I think the board state does now is it almost makes me think, okay, instead of playing that original first turn, I'm already that much closer, per se, because some of my armies do have range and speed to backline and then get to where they want to be, and I may not be able to do that tactic anymore. So it changes the way I have to think about the game, and I'm excited about that. Actually, I'm excited to try new things and see how the games start to play out against let's say horde armies that are in my face turn 1, and I have to deal with that. So I think it's just a matter of shifting your thinking and trying to adjust to it.
Yeah. And my big tinfoil hat there is like, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised to see a 5-turn game come out of this, especially if you're making the board size smaller. But we'll just have to wait and see what the mission packs actually tell us. You want those longer games?
Hey, you know me, all for getting a game.
It depends. There's times where I really love that 7-turn game because those last 2 turns, turn 6 and 7, they're so down to the wire. Both players have so few models, and if you're still playing at that point, that's the best kind of game where it's down to a single point. It's such a nail biter.
Those late rolls matter.
Every single roll matters, and especially when you're at a CP by that point too. You won't be with the new turn structure command phase, but people are going to have to change the way they play. I think more towards that mid and late game for sure.
So we did touch a little bit on the announcement of universal point increases. Any sort of initial feelings, gut reactions to that news?
1750 was a format that they were kind of pushing for a little while, and I tinkered with a little bit, played a couple of tournaments with 1750, and found it to be okay. With orc lists, I really can't start bringing toys until I pass that $1,500 point mark, and only having 250 to play with fun stuff was sometimes a little frustrating. But it's really too early to tell, right? We know that intercessors have gone up, we know that some other stuff have gone up, but we really don't know. There's a lot of models that need point adjustments across all factions. This is a great opportunity to get them up to speed. But as GW said, and as we've seen through these previews, things are going to change a lot in terms of what units are effective and which units are less effective in this new format, especially the new missions. I personally think it's too early to tell.
Yeah, I agree with that, Dustin. The other thing that I think about here is if the board is effectively shrinking a little bit, it's going to be good to not have the board as cramped as it is right now. So from my perspective, one of the things I do like about the game is being so deliberate with your movement and having space to maneuver and to be very deliberate with your actions there. And I just can't imagine that being fun if we're just cramming the board in less space with that many models and trying to get a game in. With that being said, right now, I'm actually someone who loves the 1,500 point and 1,750 point game. I feel like it opens up different tactical options for me. I feel like it's not just randomly throwing dice and trying to shoot everything off the table, but it's a little bit more focused on movement. It's a little bit more focused on objectives, things like that. And I'm actually excited to see how the boards end up looking a couple months from now when we're in 9th as opposed to what they do now.
At LVO for this year, 8th edition got pretty killy. There's a lot of matches where the game could have been won very, very early on, and I think if you're increasing the points amount, that's less firepower on the board. That means there's less frustration for people who get blown off the table in turn 1. It's less likely to happen, which is a good thing. Again, as you say, especially with distances being what they are for 9th edition. But I've played 1750 and I enjoyed it. But on the flip side, I played 2250 and did not enjoy it. There's a certain threshold where if you just go past it a little bit more, there's just too much firepower on the board that shoots too much, and so the turn mechanics of Warhammer, it can be not very pleasurable, and so reducing the points, especially with the board changes, I think is really for the best.
Yeah, great points, Dustin.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to note is the devs made it very clear, right? The points balance is not just, everything goes up by percentage X, but things are adjusted for how good they are in the new setting as well. People are freaking out about blast weapons, but they said blast weapons are getting better, so their points are also going up as well.
Yeah. And 500 point stomper, right? That's what you're saying to me?
You never know. Maybe we get some sweet new rules.
So, Brian, if you're getting better, are your points going to go up?
Oh, of course. Of course. Give me more points all the time. Let me play with one model. I don't care. I'll have my lone wolf from the start. I'll be happy. But
Ragnar can do it on his own. I've seen him do it.
And I think a very interesting thing which ties into this, because Dustin, you talked about tanks being able to shoot in the combat, and of course that was another Chicken Little Sky is Falling kind of announcement.
Sure.
And
it was for a lot of Horde.
A very general trend which makes me very happy is because I agree with Brian with 1,500 point games always felt really fun. The firepower is low enough where you don't get this huge knockout punch in the beginning. You can, trade blows a little bit at those point levels, and the games feel more engaging. But the problem is it can be a little bit more rock, paper, scissors if you can't sort of bring all your toys. Because 8th edition is at this point where there's sort of a lot of hard counters, right? Overwatch can be devastating to you, but then you might be an army that can just completely ignore Overwatch. And it's all these hard counters sort of being thrown around, right? You might have a really awesome tank, but if you can't fly, as soon as little Gretchen touches you, right, you can't shoot. They seem to be wanting to homogenize the power and the performance of all these units. So if a tank can shoot in combat now, it is more going to it's going to perform more consistently. If it's performing more consistently, one, it's fun for the person that brings that tank every game, and two, consistent performance is much easier to balance than a unit that is either just blowing another army off the table in the right matchup or just completely useless being stuck in combat with,
it's a
basic
great
units.
point, Brian. Making every unit viable is always going to be a good thing. I think that's a huge benefit of what they're doing right now. There's always those feel badsies when, hey, I just can't take my Land Raider because it's getting the bad touch every single game. That's just not a good experience.
Yeah,
I completely agree with you.
You can drop it in points all you want, and then you fight that one game where the person is not putting it immediately, and they're just losing horribly. So it's too hard to balance that way.
And that's what I see the direction of 9th and just
even things like
reading the wind.
They're changing Overwatch, like stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And like morale was too binary. They said, or they're going to make it a little bit more consistent, a little bit more useful. So all these sort of hit or miss things are going to perform more consistently.
It seems like the game is actually going to be decided during the game. Like, even with the objectives being hold it your entire turn, it seems like there might be less Alpha Strike now. Who knows if that's going to be the case? But anytime you can play an entire game and have it decided throughout the game instead of what's your list? Oh, well, this is my list, it's gone. Or, you get to go first, so you're going to win. Or I get to go second, so I'm going to hold all the objectives, I'm going to win. I think it's a benefit. The more interactions that you have, the more engaged that you can be with your opponent. So I'm super excited for it.
You heard it here, folks, kids. If you're a Tau player, make sure to buy lots of Kroot, lots of Vespens. They're coming back.
Kroot Tat Spiders. Bring them. I am thrilled whenever I square off against some Kroot.
They're cool models. I'll give them that. They're very cool looking models.
I am Kroot.
Never again.
Yeah.
Never again. Can we edit that out?
No, I can also edit it in and keep it as a soundbite for everybody.
Perfect.
So, I mean, I think overall, everything the devs have talked, and more about how they talk in the edition, it's just like incredibly exciting for me. And like every reveal, I'm excited for. I always want to hear more, and I think ninth is going to be a really good time.
But you know what? That's a good point, though, Brian, because you've been through a number of editions of the game now, and some people, 8th edition is their first. That's their first foray into 40k. So as excited as you might be, I'm sure there's others that are anxious and kind of nervous about what's on the horizon. So how do you suggest they approach this limbo period between 8th and 9th?
Well, I mean, you're talking to that guy that brings like 20 readers to every like match he can. So, for me, from a gameplay standpoint, this lame duck period between editions, it's perfect time. Just the rule with cool, man. Play with the units you just love, right? Because you're not trying to hone a tournament list. You're not really trying to prepare for, your next big event. Like, you're just trying to have some fun. Like, do a little bit of a narrative game. If there's something on your shelf that's collecting some dust, dust it off and get on the battlefield and get rolling some dice for you.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I played that game a couple days ago with Max and was able to get a dual avatar list together with my avatar of Kane as well as the Incarn, and I can honestly say I haven't had as much fun playing a game of 40k as I did that game, and I would say months. So it was an absolute.
Yeah, a lot of us got our Psychic Awakening books also during the quarantine. Haven't really had a chance yet to take it for a spin. No, that's the case.
Yeah.
Saga of the Beast. That's me and you.
Yeah, my Ragnar is waiting to go. He hasn't been in a real game yet.
Tharaka is getting pulled out
Ragnar
tomorrow
versus...
with one of my buddies, so I'm excited. Going to get his bad luck new paint job worn off. But like, there's a lot of units that came out during October. Was that a year and a half ago? And I just said, why would I ever play that? These rules are terrible. But with Saga of the Beast, there's always new custom jobs, and I'm saying, you know what? Maybe I need to go to the shop, go buy me a couple of those corkscrews, or buy me a couple of those shock jump dragstas, because they got some cool ass rules now that I really want to take for a spin. And that's what I think people should be doing this lame duck period. Take a look at Psychic Awakening. That gives you a little bit of a window into trends you should probably expect in the 9th edition for cool stuff to play with. And just start getting some hobby love out there and working on some models that might be collecting dust, like you said.
Yeah, focus on those cool models, because, I mean, hands down, GW puts out some of the best models in the minigaming industry.
Oh, you're 100% right. I still love my 25-year-old Aspect Warrior models and still love them and play with them.
Plastic aspects, one day, please.
Make it happen, GW.
They'll all be on 28 mil bases, though. I'm like, damn. For the week of reveals that we had so far, I think that pretty much covers it. We'll just be watching the reveals and what's coming out next like a hawk. Any sort of last things you guys are going to be doing to prepare for 9th edition?
Dustin, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. If you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, got an article on the website on how to get better at 40k without playing 40k. So I'm going to be playing a lot of Blood Bowl, a lot of Warhammer Underworlds. I got some people coming over tomorrow to play some Age of Sigmar, because those are some games that are still in a stable state. They're not in that lame duck period, as you said. Great games to experience that also have a lot of different ideas and different approaches to wargaming as a whole that I think you can really bring to 40k. And those are universal ideas that are going to be good for 8th edition, 9th edition, or whenever 10th edition happens to us 10 years from now, hopefully.
Oh, great points, Dustin. From my end, so you all know this about me, with 3 kids, pretty demanding job. I don't get as much hobby time these days as I used to, but one of the things I will be focusing on is trying to get that equity on the home front. Spending a good amount of time with the roommates to make sure that when 9th does come around, I have some goodwill I can cash in on to get my 40k fix in. But to your point, though, Brian, ruling with cool for sure. Adding to my overall collection, we're just about finished with 2,500 points worth of Custodes that I'm super excited about getting on the battlefield. Adding to the Grey Knights, just continuing to add to Harlequins and Craft Worlds, because you know what? When 9th comes around, I want to have tons of stuff on my shelf that I can pick from and play with. So really excited about that. And I guess from a skills standpoint, having played since 2nd edition, there's just things that continue to transcend editions, like being deliberate with your movement, making sure that you're using the correct order of operations in the psychic phase, using certain spells first to be efficient and optimal. Same thing with the shooting phase, making sure that you have enough guns within range of targets that you need dead. You make sure you kill it dead. Shooting first with units that, have that don't have options to shooting with units that do have options, or shooting with fixed damage before variable damage. So stuff like that. I think that's super important to just make sure that you're tightening up those skills and you're sharp going into ninth.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though for me, my favorite thing in the game is analyzing units, writing lists, and I'm excited for ninth for a new opportunity to just basically practice that skill more and more and more. So, stay tuned for GDFC, and we'll see if we can walk you guys through some of those concepts. If you haven't checked out Dustin's article, definitely do so, because being able to pull these different skills from different games makes a big difference on that battlefield.
So says tournament winner Brian from Age of Sigmar. Also, you are one of the best Age of Sigmar players I've seen. So clearly, this man's learned a thing or two.
My goal is always bring the Stormcast Vanguard, so no one knows what I'm doing. I will say, Age of Sigmar is one of those games where it really made me focus more on movement, and really the power of it, and it translated well to 40k.
It reminds you that it's such a fundamental skill for any war game. So many people just think about shooting for 40k, AOS, play it, learn how to move right in 40k.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, yes, you're in range, but you should also think about what exact range do you want to be in at the same time. I mean, I think that pretty much wraps it up for us for this podcast. I mean, stay tuned for more content. We'll be putting out articles as usual. Hopefully, we'll get back to filming here pretty soon. We got some good battle reports planned, as well as a wealth of content preparing you guys for 9th edition and beyond.
Spoilers. Gaz Gothraka coming to you soon.
And he's very, very angry. Hopefully he's been working out in the quarantine, And
he doesn't need to work out. He's just a severed head attached to a big giant body.
Yeah, he's got to walk across the battlefield. I don't want him huffing and puffing before he gets into combat.
Just you wait.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us. We'll see you out there on the battlefield.